Been a busy trade deadline day so far. The biggest deal of the day, of course, Juan Soto heading over to San Diego. But in return, going to Washington, D.C. is a lot of prospects. We had to check in with Lindsay Crosby from Locked On Prospects because there's a lot of names. Some of us don't know all about them. So was this the best option for Soto, and did they get enough in return, in your opinion?
I think that ultimately there were teams that could have given more, but this was the biggest return you were going to get mid-season. I've been insistent for a while that when you trade in the middle of the season and you want MLB-ready pieces like the Nationals have been asking for, it's very difficult for a contending team to ship out MLB pieces and still be able to contend. So for an in-season trade, this was the best you were going to get. Mackenzie Gore, at one point in time, was the number one pitching prospect in all of baseball. C.J. Abrams, dynamic shortstop, number one prospect in the system, has a ceiling of a future all-star. Robert Hassell, number two prospect in the system, a guy that can play center field, is a machine at leadoff for you. James Wood, number four prospect in the system, has probably the best raw power in the entire minors and is the kind of guy you're going to stick into the middle of your lineup. He's going to bat cleanup and he's going to hit 40 home runs for you. Jarlin Susana is the really interesting prospect in this deal to me. 18 years old, really raw, really young. He's in rookie ball right now. Very, very electric arm. Can hit 100 miles an hour on the fastball. Has a great power slider. But 18-year-old pitchers are the riskiest type of prospects. And so he's the only real true lottery pick. They got a lot of guys with pretty high floors. And I think for a midseason trade, this was as good as you were going to get by the Padres.
The Nationals, not a great team before the trade. They're definitely not going to be a good team now. How does this, impact their future? Or these guys we're going to see in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? Where are we going to see the bulk of these guys making their, major league debuts and putting some work in?
Well, the good thing is a lot of these guys tend to be younger and have a few years before they're ready to go. So a lot of these debuts are going to be 2024, maybe 2025 for a guy like a Susana. And then that works out well because Mackenzie Gore is the only guy that's logged any appreciable service time, and he's still in his first year of control. So it's going to be probably 2 or 3 years before you start to see these guys hit the majors, with the exception of Gore. But you're going to be able to add in the guys you just drafted in the draft 2 weeks ago, as well as the high pick you're going to have next year. And all of those talents should be coming up around 24 and 25.
Obviously, we expected to get a lot in return for Soto whenever he was going to be moved. And you did mention that if they'd done this at a different time, maybe they would have gotten more. But is this the largest kind of chunk of prospects we've seen move in a while? Or what would you compare it to, maybe, that we're aware of?
This is the biggest that I can think of. And we keep saying like it's the Juan Soto trade. Josh Bell's in here too, but he's a rental. 4 top 10 prospects for, in essence, one player is not something I can remember being done in recent history. The closest parallel that I've had for it is the NFL's Herschel Walker trade. And we know famously how that went after they gave up everything to get Herschel Walker. So one of the biggest trades, and I think now the pressure is really on San Diego. I mean, you just shipped out the entire top half of your farm system, and you need to go deep in the playoffs, and you need to win a World Series in the next 2 years before you lose Juan Soto potentially to free agency because of what you gave up to get him.
You mentioned the farm system. Did San Diego just totally ravage their farm system going forward? And then how good is Washington's now?
So San Diego was already getting towards that bottom tier. They've moved a lot of pieces out of that farm system in the last couple of years. And with this, I'd probably have them now down in maybe the bottom 5 as far as total talent in the system, simply because of their top 30 in 2020. I think they've moved 21 of those guys, 21 of those 30. The Nationals, by contrast, didn't have a lot of high-end talent. And so I kind of had them around the low to mid 20s. I kind of see them as a top 10 system now. They added a lot of guys with really high ceilings. Mackenzie Gore, high ceiling. C.J. Abrams, high ceiling. James Woods, I think, has one of the highest ceilings of any prospect that moved at the deadline. And so just this influx of high-end talent has brought them up. And you're going to see that in their minor league performances next year. Those teams will be a lot better than they are right now.
Now, I know prospects are prospects for a reason, but is there one name in this deal that you're like, this is almost 100% guarantee that we're going to see some contributions at the major league level?
Robert Hassell. He's a guy, so he's playing center field, not necessarily known for his power, but already he hits over 300 at just about every level he's been in. And somebody that I feel like you could probably take him right now, plug him into a big league lineup, and he's going to be a leadoff hitter for you. He wouldn't be the best one in the league, but he would be serviceable right now. Mm-hmm. Give him 2 more years to develop in the minors. I feel very confident that that return is going to work out. The real questions I have are about James Wood, the power hitter, and Jarlin Susana, the young pitcher. Those are the 2 guys with the biggest variance that may or may not work out, depending on how well the Nationals do with developing those guys.
Fair enough, Lindsay. We appreciate a lot of names being thrown around, so we like to hear the perspectives of where they're at and where they could be heading. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.